Welcome to the Renews podcast with me, Stephen Dunn.
I've witnessed firsthand around the table of the EU Energy Council what crisis means, what security means with the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, and all of a sudden energy was no longer a technical department but a strategic department.
So I'm here with the WindEurope CEO, Tinne van der Straeten, who's new to the job. You're just over a week in the position, Tinne. You're very welcome to the Renews podcast.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
So how have you found your time at WindEurope?
Of course, WindEurope as an organization is not new to me because I've worked with WindEurope on multiple occasions, but it is a new role. Specifically for me at a very specific and critical point in time when in Europe we discuss competitiveness, when we discuss security and resilience. So this is a very important time because we as a wind industry, we can at scale deploy renewable energy, wind both onshore and both offshore, and thus provide in the huge quantities of electricity that we need. So this is an exciting time, and also a new job comes, of course, also with getting to know new people or the same people, but in a different perspective. So it's impressive, let's say.
It's not been an easy time in the wind sector in the last few years. We're coming off the back of, really difficult business case challenges, high inflation, questioning of the ability of renewables to be part of the energy system. So why would you take this job now?
Precisely for that reason. I'm a very strong believer in the energy transition, and I'm a very strong believer in wind energy and wind power. As a former minister, I have witnessed firsthand around the table of the EU Energy Council what crisis means, what security means with the full-scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine, and all of a sudden energy was no longer a technical department but a strategic department. We've seen how citizens have been taken hostage by very high energy bills, but we've also seen that we have a solution, that we have an answer, and specifically deploy renewable energy. And yes, it has not been an easy going for the industry, but the time is now, and so it's not the time to whine. It's not also not a time to blame who is responsible for this, but really a time to come together and bring solutions to the table.
We're at a pace now where less than half of the wind required to hit EU targets is being built at the moment. So thinking about that and thinking about your coming into this job, what are your priorities right now in order to turn that rate up?
That failed auctions be something of the past, as something very general, of course, but as you rightly say, we have the targets in place. Targets have been committed to. Targets have been signed at European level, but also bilaterally, memorandums of understanding that were signed between different countries. So the target is there, but the turbine not yet. And so how to move from a target to a turbine is indeed now most important challenge, and how to combine the two is specifically with appropriate support mechanism. We have a very beautiful in the UK with auction round 7. That was a huge success, 8.4 or 8.3 gigawatt that was awarded, and it was because of a very cleverly designed auction mechanism with the CFD. And a CFD, a contract for difference, is a major de-risking instrument that allows for the industry to really take on the risk, to take on the project, and to build the project.
We might come back to the CFD in a moment, but before that, this week European leaders are preparing to discuss how to protect and grow manufacturing in the EU. It's all over the news. We have energy leaders, I think, in Antwerp. The French President Emmanuel Macron was interviewed this week, and he talked about a Buy European policy for European manufacturing. We're seeing the Industrial Accelerator Act, which will come in the coming days, which will outline the Commission's plan to favour the manufacturing of EU-made equipment. What we're seeing really, isn't it, Europe is starting to circle the wagons here to try to keep out the Asian supply chain. Where do you stand on this for the wind industry in Europe?
I stand on the side of resilience. And indeed, European leaders are gathering in a pre-retreat, let's say, in Antwerp today, just around the corner. And they go to Aldenbiesen tomorrow. And then they will also meet in the formal format later on. And at the core of what they are discussing is competitiveness on the one hand, to go hand in hand with an anchoring of the industries in Europe. And so we feel very concerned and also as participant of this discussion, because we are also a European industry. We assemble wind turbines here in Europe. We build them here and we supply electricity here. Of course, our supply chain is globally diversified. That's true. That's a given, that's a fact. But it also means that competition needs to be open, needs to be fair, and that everyone has to play by the same rules. We have legislation and instruments in place, like, for example, the foreign subsidies regulation. So if European leaders are very committed that indeed strategic industries need to be anchored and need to stay here in Europe, then we are very happy to work with them and come up with solutions. We see in this discussion, we have two heads, in fact. So we have, of course, our industry ourselves, a European industry. We build here, we supply electricity here. We are here to increase Europe's independence and to decrease dependence on foreign nations, but also on other imported and mainly fossil fuels. But we also see us as essential piece of the puzzle for the other industries that need access to affordable and green electricity. So they have the major challenge that they need to electrify, and they can. There are many industrial processes that are ready to be electrified already as from today, but they need to be certain that the electricity will be there. So they need grids, they need wind turbines to be built, projects to come online, and also at affordable prices.
I mean, you mentioned playing by the same rules there. I mean, the Chinese suppliers, the OEMs, the fabricators would say, and in fact, I was at a conference 2 weeks ago in Scotland where a senior Mingyang official said, we will open our books for cybersecurity issues. We will play by the rules of the local economies. We will invest and establish large-scale manufacturing in Europe and provide jobs under a localization strategy. Indeed, another company, Dajin, which supplies monopiles, is setting up a port in Gijon in Spain. What's not to like about these companies coming and establishing these facilities and supporting the European supply chain?
First and foremost, what's important is let's not forget that we have a European industry, that we have a strong supply chain that is European today, that needs to be cherished, that needs also to be supported, that needs to be... We are, with the wind industry, the only clean tech sector that is in European hands, that has a strong European footprint. So that's the first thing I like. That's the first thing. I would love to see Europe, but also national policymakers, but also companies and industries that buy electricity to be proud of that and to support that and to avoid that there are new dependencies that are created. And second, we provide critical infrastructure. We make electricity, we generate electricity, we bring it to industries, companies, and to citizens' homes via the grid. And so it's very important that this critical infrastructure is also seen as critical infrastructure and has the protection it requires, and that's specifically with regard to the cybersecurity. And third, open and fair competition and also a level playing field. And that is important. And there is European legislation that exists that's also used by the European Commission.
There are some countries already expressing opposition to President Macron's position. I think Sweden today said, no, let European companies compete directly on quality levels with Asian counterparts. We don't need trade barriers. To go back to your point around the two different positions, one of which is the provision of cheap electricity, how will Europe be able to build out to the level that is required and provide cheap electricity to large energy users if it's relying on a European supply chain that is high quality but also lacking competition?
I do not necessarily agree that we lack competition. I think there is competition. So that is, it can maybe always be better and it needs to be, but as far as I know, there are, European Commission is not lacking into the issue of too less competition. At the same time, how can we bridge those different angles? We need to work more closely together. And there are two pieces of the same coin, let's say, that are equally important. With regard to offshore wind, we as an industry committed to bring prices down, to be more cost competitive, and to bring down or to decrease LCOE by 40% by 2030. How can we achieve this? If we have a visibility on projects pipeline. And so we had in the past, we had these targets that were agreed on by 2030, by 2040, by 2050, but we had no annual breakdowns, we had no intermediate milestones. To have a better planning but also better coordination, it's best that you decide on intermediate targets. And so that's beautiful about the Hamburg summit, where it was decided that it's 10 gigawatt a year that would be auctioned through CFDs. And this will create a visibility of a project pipeline, so that's for the supply chain also easier to plan ahead and to avoid the boom and bust, because it's the boom and bust when everyone is placing the same orders for the same equipment for the same moment in time. Then you have scarcity margins, prices goes up, the scarcity and the unpredictability is reflected in prices. So on that front, if we have visibility, we can create predictability and we can bring prices down. On the other hand, I think we need to be more smart to have better contracts, agreements between the producer and the off-taker, and in specific cases, together with a government or a multilateral bank, or, for example, the EIB to give some counter guarantees. But so better combine generation supply, and offtake with longer term contracts to better also allocate risks, and for the governments and for example EIB or other institutions to work with counter guarantees or other things, so that these are also things that are not need to be reflected in the prices that are charged one to the other. So if we can work on those both fronts, we will be able also to generate and supply and sell electricity at an affordable and also, most important, a predictable price.
You mentioned the Hamburg summit. It commits the continent, obviously, to a huge expansion of offshore wind, 500 gigawatts by 2050, 15 gigawatts a year in the 2030s, cross-border projects, connections between TSOs. You know, I've been covering offshore wind for a decade and I've seen very similar promises over many, many years. What's different about this?
What's different now, it's the commitment, the yearly commitments to do 10 gigawatts a year. And also a specific commitment to CFD as a major de-risking support mechanism. And that is what is different from the Ostende Summit that Belgium organized 2 years before. But it's also important to see where we come from in the format of the North Sea Summit. So that was launched in 2022, May 2022, in the port of Esbjerg in Denmark. And I was, at the time, the European Commission, together with the Netherlands, with Belgium, with Denmark and with Germany. And that was mainly saying, we can repower Europe. At this point in time, when we are facing the largest energy crisis ever, we can repower Europe through the development and upscaling of offshore winds. 1 year later, in 2023, we came back together, not only the four of us, but we also invited the UK, Norway, Ireland, also France, Luxembourg, to say it's not just the four of us, we are the North Sea countries. And what was very specific about the format that was launched first in Edberg and then in Ostende and also continued in Hamburg, it's a trilateral format. It's heads of state and prime ministers together with line ministers and with the industry that come together, and that from North Sea Summit to North Sea Summit built on what they have decided before. Just a few countries to more countries that decide on a target, a huge target. And now in Hamburg, they decided basically to say, okay, we are going to do this together. We are going to do cooperation targets. We are going to do 10 gigawatt at a time, and we are going to work with what was already decided at European level. We are going to do it through CFDs. And then it's also, of course, it came at a point in time when the UK did a very successful auction, the 8.4 gigawatt in auction round 7, which is then, of course, also the real life example that was given. If you have the auction design right, you can have a good price, a good auction, and you can be certain that indeed the project will be built. So we must now look forward also to the next North Sea Summit and move from Hamburg to the next, and also reassess where we stand and what different action point needs to be taken from Hamburg to, I hope, London, but that's not sure yet, I think, but that would maybe be a good place to reconvene.
You are listening to the ReNews podcast. For breaking news or to access our exclusive market intelligence on the global renewables sector, subscribe at renews.biz. Now, back to the show. This CFD is obviously a very successful model in some countries, but it's not universally liked. In Denmark, we've seen onshore wind developers complain that the introduction of an offshore CFD will destroy any hope of a merchant market. In Germany, we've seen gigawatts of offshore wind farms allocated on the basis of merchant business cases, now struggling to figure out a way forward if CFDs are going to be the standard model. How are you going to navigate this? Because presumably some of your members are less keen on CFDs than others. And doesn't the industry need to get to a point where there's a pathway to move away from CFDs and state support?
I would say yes, but I would also say that counts for every energy technology. For every energy technology, and name me one technology today that doesn't need support today, which brings me to a broader discussion that our market design not always delivers what we need. A security of supply, for example. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in need for capacity remuneration mechanisms or indeed renewable energy targets. Otherwise, we wouldn't need CFDs. And the main thing we want to achieve is that security of supply and also resilient supply of electricity. And therefore, de-risking is needed, support is needed, and every technology today is benefiting from a support mechanism. So I would say yes, but in general, it counts for energy in general. On CFD, we must not and never forget that although we have a European view on things, and that we unite at the European level, that in this case CFD is the preferred go-to mechanism, that it can be implemented in a golden way and in one simple way in every national jurisdiction. That's not the case. We are 27. We have different realities that needs to be addressed specifically. So we don't necessarily have to fight the label, but look substance-wise. Germany is a specific example you gave, because indeed it were merchant-led projects, and I think not that many will be built because economic circumstances have changed. And Denmark is another example because they are an exporting country. They can produce huge quantities of renewable electricity that they won't need for themselves. And so they are also, I think, not unhappy to help neighboring countries, but they are in the right way also addressing, okay, but how is this going to work? How are we going to distribute costs? And it is not an unfair question. It's not an unfair question, but it's a major challenge at the European level. Because that means that we also need to rethink how that we see projects. And it is for a long time, I believe that although you sometimes launch projects in a bilateral way, an interconnection between two countries, for example, Bornholm Island is an example that was also signed at Hamburg Summit, the energy island in Bornholm, jointly Denmark and Germany. These bilateral projects, they have a higher benefit, more than just a bilateral benefit, more also European benefit. And how can we then take in the European level in those projects? How do we distribute costs in a fair manner is one of the topics that will be more and more addressed. Interconnection, better interconnections can be an answer, for example, but I'm certain there are also different answers to it. So what I take, it is fair to raise such an issue. It should not be put under the carpet, but it should taken on the table and a solution to be found. Denmark is one example, and another example that you can cite is, for example, Spain. Spain, that has huge quantities of onshore wind, is the biggest market for onshore wind, and for renewable in general, that is suffering from a negative electricity price that are also hurting profitability of the energy projects, and also have an impact on how people see and value renewable energy projects. So this is a huge transition that we are doing. It's new for everyone, and so it comes with obstacles, it comes with hurdles, it comes with complicated issues, but issues that deserve attention, deserve solutions, and that will need to bring people around the table to indeed find a solution.
Is there a risk that the ambition of the Hamburg Declaration is too complex? I mean, we have seen over 20 years an expansion of renewables to an unprecedented level if you were to imagine 20 years ago looking ahead. Why not just leave it to each individual country to continue down this path instead of complicating what you've just mapped out there sounds like a real challenge?
We cannot leave it be. And the reason is that we import, as Europe as a whole, we import 58% of our. So we are hugely dependent. And where we thought before 2022 that was not an issue in itself because everyone was happy. We've built bridges to, not to name Russia, to be utterly dependent on just one nation and on one fossil fuel, in this case gas. This is not sustainable. We will be importers anyway. So what we need to do is increase as much as possible the energy that we can produce ourselves. And what we can produce ourselves is electricity. And for that we have sun and wind that cannot be taken hostage. And that is the main reason why we have to overcome these obstacles, and that we have to say, okay, we cannot leave this just as it is. Because if we do that, then we are not honest with our children and with the other generations to come. It is our duty and our obligation now to create security again.
And yet the cold, hard business case of building these projects has been undermined in the last few years, just at the precise time that Europe has needed to escape from Russian imports. Is the CFD enough to restore the business case, or are there other things that are urgently required to help the utilities, the developers build these large-scale projects?
Electrification. And that is something that we are eagerly awaiting also from the European Commission, the Electrification Action Plan. Electrification is key to economic security and to security in general, but it will not fall out from the air. So we need to drive electric cars. We need to think about how we heat our homes, electrify industrial processes. But we need an electrification action plan. It's not only the generation side that we have to work on, but also the offtake side. So that is that in order to make this work, no, CFDs alone will not make it. If there is no electricity to sell, if there is no offtake, it will hinder even CFDs because it will be one-sided. So it's also the other side that needs to be looked at, and that is really electrification as the missing link that is necessary.
CFDs, grid expansion, electrification. The next word really to think about there is cost. Cost is the political battlefield now for renewables. We're seeing across Europe the rise of right-wing political entities and opponents of renewables who are really beating renewables with the cost stick. How concerned are you about the cost piece and the rise of this anti-renewable sentiment at the moment?
Yeah. I am concerned about everything that is cost related because I'm concerned about cost of living, affordability in general. You do your grocery shopping or you're throwing a party, you're inviting your family to do the grocery shopping. So this is something that is in general a concern. I say this in this way also to indicate for the 600 members that we are as WindEurope, it's very well known that cost is something that we have to bring down. That's also why we did the commitment during the Hamburg summit. And it's true also what you say, the observation you make, that from some perspective of the political spectrum, they see renewable energy as an energy that drives costs up. But let me take it from another angle. If they advocate for other technologies, are they necessarily cheaper? For example, nuclear. It isn't. You're talking to a former energy minister that I've done three things. I needed to start first and foremost with the implementation of a capacity remuneration mechanism because of security of supply reasons. So for many years in Belgium, there were no investments in new generation capacity. And in order to tackle this, it was shared view that we needed for that the capacity remuneration mechanism really on the short term to have our security of supply tackled with. That was an auction we did, and there came 2 gas-fired power plants out of it, which was necessary, but not for me something to be overly happy with. So we made everything to make sure that they would have as low, not so much running hours to bring the running hours down, so to include flexibility and to increase renewable energy capacity. But we also decided to extend the lifetime of 2 nuclear power plants. So I had for conventional power, for storage, and for demand-side management, I had a capacity remuneration mechanism. For the nuclear, I had a CFD, and for offshore wind, I also had a CFD. So it's also sometimes a little bit name and shame of technologies for political wins, and it shouldn't be the case. If you talk to the industries present in Antwerp today, what they want is homegrown electricity. They say, give us whatever you can do that is low carbon. And they have no issue with wind and nor with sun. Yes, we can do a better job. to be more cost competitive? Yes, for sure. If we have a visibility on the project pipeline, as we discussed, if we know what is going to be auctioned, if we know that, okay, national governments are serious about the targets, they will put auctions in place, okay, we can do our part of the job. But let's not make it into a political discussion that this is an issue for renewable energy by essence, because it absolutely is not the case. We run on wind, and wind is free for all.
But the reality is that there will be a political discussion.
Yeah.
So how does wind...
How do you mean there will be a political discussion?
Because of the rise of the right-wing parties, the possibility that some of these parties may enter governments over the next few years. Look at Reform in the UK, which has said if it gets into government, it will scrap all CFDs. There is a real fear in the industry that in the next number of years, the relatively stable, liberal, democratic societies that we have in Europe may fracture, and agreements like the Hamburg Summit might break down. So there is an idea among people in the industry that they need to fight this political rhetoric that's taking place. I guess what I'm asking is, how does the industry do that right now?
Just do a good job, be on time, do projects within budget, advocate for good auction design, not to ask for too much, not to ask for 3 cherries on the cake. If we have the cake, it's fine. It's fine. The business case will be there. And I'm absolutely very confident that we can realize our projects if we have a CFD with really very competitive strike prices. We are not asking for a CFD to have a blank check, to say, okay, just do a CFD and then we will build wind turbines with everything that you can imagine. No. What we expect from a CFD is a de-risking mechanism so that we can put the billions in that are required to do the projects. My members, our industry, the wind industry, we are entrepreneurial. We have an entrepreneurial spirit and we are very value-driven. So if we do a good job, I'm also fairly confident that whatever policymaker, whatever political perspective they come from, democratic perspective, goes without saying, that they will be open to the logical thinking. And I'm very confident when I see governments like the UK government. You mentioned Reform. Okay, I see what you mean. But I also tend to look a little bit what the government is doing and what Ed Miliband is doing. He's holding the line. He had a successful auction for offshore wind. He had a successful auction for onshore wind. He created Great British Energy. And for sure, things in the future can be done better. But every milestone you achieve will also come with maybe things that could have been better. You can do better the next time. So I am also a strong believer in wishful thinking on the other side. If we are determined to make it work, we can make it work. If we believe in it and we take appropriate actions and do many steps in the same direction, we will get there.
Tinne van der Straeten, thank you very much for joining us,
yes,
and best of luck in the new job.
Thank you.
The Renews podcast was produced and edited by me, Stephen Dunn. Click subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you never miss an episode. For more exclusive market intelligence on the renewable sector, see renews.biz.